City Council. I will now call the meeting to order and ask the clerk to call the roll.
Councilwoman Ansari, Councilman DeCiccio, Councilwoman Guardado,
Here.
Councilwoman O'Brien,
Here.
Councilwoman Pastor,
Here.
Councilwoman Stark,
Here.
Councilman Waring,
Here.
Vice Mayor Garcia,
Here.
Mayor Gallego.
Thank you all for joining us. We will begin with council information and follow-up requests. Do any council members have updates? We'll begin with Councilwoman Guardado.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to give a big thank you and shout out to Parks and Recreation Department. This past Saturday, their team worked with us to host our second annual Maryvale Drive-Through Boo. It was a huge success thanks to the hard work of park staff and our volunteers and community partners, including Cartwright Elementary School District, the Milwaukee Brewers, and many others. Over 160 vehicles drove through with close to 750 attendees. I also wanted to give recognition to our fire department for distributing candy and working with Equality Health and our Visu Consulting for COVID testing and vaccinations. Finally, a special shout out to our Neighborhood Services Department Director, Spencer Self, for spooking the families with a horrifying Michael Myers costume. It was a huge success having him out there. For upcoming District 5 events, I want to remind residents that this Friday, October 29th, we will be hosting our Halloween at Homestead Park on 26th Avenue and Glendale Avenue. It will be a trunk or treat event in partnership with the Parks and Recreation Department and the Violence Impact Project. I invite everyone to bring their children out to meet some neighbors for free candy and support the efforts to continue to activate the park. Finally, on Halloween, Sunday, October 31st, check out the children's trunk or treat at Ocho Rios Restaurant on 43rd Avenue and Northern from 5 p.m. to 8 p.m. There will be a bounce house, coloring painting section, Halloween costumes contest, and much more. And they have very amazing food, amazing drinks. I've been there since they opened up their restaurant, and they continue to be a very diverse community and trying to bring everyone into their restaurant as they continue to promote it and they continue to bring community together. We've had a lot of celebrations. As you can tell, Halloween is one of my favorite holidays. So definitely looking forward to the upcoming ones and to the ones that we've already had. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Councilwoman O'Brien.
Thank you so much. This coming Friday is the District 1 Community Breakfast at the Doubletree Hotel at Metro Center Parkway. I've invited Phoenix Police to give an overview of the department staffing levels and what they are doing to hire new staff and retain existing staff in the department. I'm inviting D1 residents and the community to join us on Friday at 7:30 a.m. You can go to Phoenix.gov / District 1 to RSVP for this Friday's meeting. I also want to thank Parks and Recreation Department for organizing a very fun Halloween event on Saturday with the Moon Valley Gardens Neighborhood Block Watch, Black Mountain Community Alliance, Deer Valley Block Watch, and Arizona Gain. I enjoyed seeing some of the kids make crafts, playing some games with some really spooky characters. The evening weather was wonderful, and a lot of our community members took advantage of it. Unfortunately, I just missed getting to see Councilwoman Stark and Mayor Gallego, but we also did have great attendance by our community action officers from Black Mountain and other officers. So it was great to see the kids engaging with them. I also want to thank the Willow Creek Block Watch for inviting me to their GAIN event. I got to meet some of the neighbors in the area who are committed to keeping their neighborhood safe and getting to know each other so that they can solve some of their problems on their own. It was a really nice event. Also, once you got to attend the Cactus Park and Metro Center Block Watch event, they hosted a joint hybrid event, so folks were able to attend in person or virtually. And because Metro Center Block Watch was having difficulty finding a location for in-person Cactus Block Watch, or Cactus Park Block Watch, worked with them to have that event together. So it was great to see all those community members coming together and meeting in person. There was a lot of information shared. They discussed the gated alley program, as well as some other fun things. So just thank you to all those community members who are volunteering those extra hours to keep our neighborhoods safe. Thanks, Mayor.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Councilwoman Pastor.
Thank you, Mayor. On Saturday, October 16th, I believe I have my slides. All right, next one, please. On Saturday, October 16th, Laura's Lions, our student softball team, won the Black Lives Matter mural fundraising tournament. It was a great event organized by Gisette Knight. There they are with the trophy. Coming soon, this is a 58-foot wall at Park Central facing 3rd Street. It will soon be home to a new mural celebrating the vibrancy, the heart of the city in District 4. Working with ArtLink, we have narrowed down from 25 artists to our top 3. I look forward to keeping you updated on what will soon be a new landmark in Phoenix. New pathways for youth. Last week, we filmed our November Phoenix TV segment with Dr. Karen Johnson, the new CEO at New Pathways for Youth. I look forward to working with this organization who help youth realize their full potential in life. Calling all young artists. In more art news, I'm excited to announce our Grid Bike Rack Art Contest. We have partnered with Keeney in the Streets Department to get our youth 18 and under involved in turning our bike racks into works of art. The top 3 winners will win their very own personalized street sign. And then I have a community coffee tomorrow at 8:30. I'll be hosting, it will be at Fama Cafe, and I hope you can join me. And once again, District 4, email council.district.4@phoenix.gov. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Councilwoman Stark.
Thank you, Mayor. It was really great to have our GAIN events back. They were really fun, but the most special one was the rededication of the Winnipeg Green Park. All of the block watches in Sunny Slope held their GAIN event there, and we honored Winnipeg Green. And it was just a pleasure to see her. She's now in her 90s, and she's still just as active as she could ever be in Sunny Slope. She really is a legend in Sunny Slope. It really was a special event. And thank you, Mayor, for being there as well. Thank you.
Thank you. It really was a neat. Our city is built by strong volunteers, and she is one of the leaders. Any additional council member comments? I want to wish a happy birthday to Councilwoman O'Brien and Pastor. October's a big month here. Also want to thank everyone who was involved in the big months of volunteer activities. GAIN is now not just one weekend, but a huge amount of work for our team, and so far going very well. Also Parks Department and others enormously busy, so thank you to all. And then I want to join in people all across Arizona who are sending condolences to the family of our former Attorney General Grant Woods on his passing. With that, we do not have any consent items today or a call for executive session, so I'll turn to our city manager for any reports or budget updates he would like to offer.
Mayor, I have no updates at this time. Thank you.
Fabulous. Well, then we will move to our first agenda item, which is reinvestment in infill. For item 1A, I would ask that Councilwoman Pastor introduce the item, as she has been a champion for our historic neighborhoods.
Thank you, Mayor. I just want to thank my colleagues and the mayor who approved the funding for this study. The historic preservation community is thanking you also. I've been fortunate to represent the vast majority of HPs. Place Economics is the leader in this area of expertise. And despite statewide challenges to historic preservations, we are doing well in Phoenix. The consultant's work outlines the importance of heritage commercial properties. And another discovery in this process is homes pre-1970s that aren't historic eligible are definitely a fabric of our community, and the city and community needs to figure out how to protect and continue the vibrancy by investing in their area. Now you will listen to what a great opportunity historic homes and historic preservations brings to our city. Thank you.
Mayor, Councilman Pastor, and City Council, thank you for this opportunity to provide an update on two items today related to reinvestment in infill. As Councilman Pastor stated, last year, City Council approved a study on historic preservation in Phoenix by a third-party consultant. Here with me today to give an update on the study are Alan Stevenson, our Planning and Development Director, Michelle Dodds, Historic Preservation Officer, and our consultant, Donovan Ripkema, with Place Economics. Before I turn over the presentation to Mr. Stevenson, I would like to say that this discussion today is very timely, as the Arizona Historic Preservation Conference is set to take place this week, Wednesday through Friday. And with that, I'll turn over to Director Stevenson.
Thank you, Ms. Spencer. Mayor, members of council, the call for this plan has its roots in the adoption by the mayor and council of the Preserve Historic Phoenix plan, which is our historic preservation plan, back in 2015. The overall effort of this plan and study is to look at the economic, social, cultural, and environmental impacts of historic preservation. One of the other items that we also asked Place Economics to look into and provide some supporting data on is how the pre-1970 housing stock, although not historic by historic preservation standards, it does provide a quality level of housing that's in the city today that is affordable, and trying to document the importance of that within the city of Phoenix. So that's the other component that is included in the study, in addition to the heritage commercial area discussion that Councilwoman Pastor just alluded to. With that, overall, as Councilwoman Pastor said, the study is good. It provides information about what's the unique aspects of how we do preservation here in Phoenix, and then we'll be back to answer any questions when Mr. Ripka is done with his presentation. Thank you.
Sorry. Thank you, Mayor and Council members, for giving us time to present this great findings. We were thrilled to work with Michelle Dodd's office and other departments in City Hall, got great cooperation, but we were particularly happy to really discover for ourselves the great heritage in the city of Phoenix. One thing you need to start out with is that of the 10 largest cities, Phoenix is the only one that both lacks the carrot of a state historic tax credit. 35 or 36 states have one. Arizona does not. But also because of the outgrowth of Prop 207, you're very limited in the creation of new historic districts. So you start out, frankly, with a handicap on both of those directions. And yet, Phoenix has adopted its own tools and strategies to maintain its unique historic character. And as we did this study, we decided we should call that Preservation Phoenix style. But you've identified in a larger context other goals, strategies, values for the city, including connectivity and sustainability and diversity and prosperity. And what we learned in this study is, in fact, historic preservation in this city advances all of those. So just some basics. Within the city of Phoenix, about 1% of the land area and 1% of the population is within local historic districts. Now, that's not exactly right, in that the wonderful South Mountain Park area is also an historic district, but excluding that, it's about 1% of the land and 1% of the population. One of the real key characteristics of your historic districts is that they are very walkable. They are on the walk score basis, while the city is still in the automobile dependent. In fact, the vast majority of historic districts measure high on the walkability measurements. And then the issue of proximity. Those people who live in Councilwoman Pastor's districts and other historic districts, in fact, benefit from the proximity that the proximity to parks is almost twice as high, close proximity in historic districts as the city as a whole. There's also a real density. I know density is important and should be in public policy, but in fact these historic districts are providing you density at a human scale, in part because of the nature of the design in those periods, but also because they have a mixed use of housing typologies, including duplexes and fourplexes, garden-style apartments. We also looked back at the consequences of the Great Recession and the real estate crash that, of course, Arizona was particularly hit hard by, and we looked at the difference in rates of foreclosure in the beginning of the crash for another decade in the local historic districts was decidedly less than the rest of the city. When we first presented this data to the core focus group that Michelle had prepared for us, they said, well, maybe that's skewed because there might be outlying new subdivisions that have skewed it. So we looked only at the core area, and in fact, the numbers were even dramatically better, lower foreclosure rates in historic districts. Now, it's not that nobody who lives in a historic district ever gets divorced or loses their job or runs their credit card bill up too much. It is, we think, the fact that even in down markets, there's a latent demand for those houses in those neighborhoods that will get me out of trouble, let me sell that property before I get into foreclosure process. And this pattern wasn't just during the recession. It followed in the post-crisis and in the recovery, the real estate recovery, those foreclosure rates lower in the local historic districts. And the owners in those districts, in fact, for most of us, our home is our biggest economic value, and the rates of value increase, as much as that's been in all of Phoenix, in fact, was even greater in those historic districts. We think, philosophically, that in fact, healthy neighborhoods are really a mirror or reflection of the population of a city as a whole. Well, that's really true of your historic districts here in Phoenix. Here is the distribution by race in historic districts, and almost to the decimal point, a reflection of the city as a whole. Here's the income distribution. Again, almost the same as the city as a whole, but with one skew at each end. There's a slightly larger of people at the lower end of the economic spectrum and at the upper end of the economic spectrum who choose to live in historic districts, and we happen to think that's kind of healthy for people across the income spectrum to be next-door neighbors. Also, as I mentioned earlier, this issue about this greater variety of housing choices, so that two and four unit structures much higher in historic districts than is true in the city as a whole. And then the diversity of housing prices. So there's really prices of all ranges, but particularly 2/3 of the housing in historic district is in that kind of mid-market range between $200,000 and $400,000. We also look importantly, and especially in a city like Phoenix, at the environmental contributions of historic districts. Now, it's not because they're a great 1920s bungalow. It's because those older neighborhoods have had a chance to have growth, have tree cover. And so in the environmental measurements like CO2 sequestered or CO2 avoided, or very important here, gallons of water saved, decidedly greater in those environmental measurements in your local historic districts. Now, as was mentioned, we also looked at this at housing built prior to 1970. And what we looked at is census block groups that had over half of the housing stock built before 1970. We picked that year because of this kind of 50-year threshold in historic preservation. Doesn't mean everything over 50 years is historic, but that's the time you start asking the question, would this merit a historic designation? So we used 50 years, and here's why there's a problem. You see, over the last about a decade, incomes are up 10%, but rent prices up almost 30%, and home prices up over 50%. So you, as you all understand, there's a real housing affordability issue here. So these are the census block groups that meet that threshold of over half of the housing stock being built prior to 1970. And again, there's no protection for this. 95% of them are not within a local historic district where you do have some protection. Well, these play an important role. In fact, they are a greater concentration of families of Hispanic heritage in those older block groups. They are also a greater share of people at the lower income range. You look at the 30% of median income, that's 19% of those older neighborhoods versus 13% in the city. Same margin in the kind of 30 to 80% of median income. It's about a toss-up in the middle range, and then it's the newer neighborhoods that in fact have the higher income groups as a whole. And then we looked at commercial districts with heritage character. And again, this great core focus group that Michelle had assembled for us gave us great advice on areas that kind of met this test, they're commercial districts but have great heritage character within them, none of which are in fact protected. And so all of them are at risk from development pressure, but there was really positive things about these commercial districts. First of all, they include about 3.1% of all the jobs, but in the knowledge worker jobs, over 4% of those. And look at this one, in the creative class workers, 20% of those creative class jobs are in those 6 districts, even though they only make up 3% of all jobs. And it's not just the sheer numbers of jobs, but the rate of growth. That there's the comparison in both the creative class and knowledge workers jobs. Not only is there a skew to choose being in those districts, but they're growing at a decidedly faster rate within those districts. So the conclusion of all of this is Phoenix has a wealth of historic resources. There's a wide range of public policy goals that are advanced through historic preservation. Most historic resources, in fact, are not protected through individual landmark or historic districts, and particularly these commercial heritage areas are particularly at risk. But through the effective use of bond funds and preservation easements and voluntary landmarking and strong advocacy from the public, nonprofit, and private sector, Phoenix really is stewarding its heritage for future generations, and it's doing so in your own way. It's doing so in Preservation Phoenix style. Thank you very much.
Mayor, members of council, thank you for the opportunity to hire Place Economics to gather this data and tell the important story of historic preservation here in the city of Phoenix. Staff is requesting acceptance of this study and its findings. Again, there are no recommendations. These are just findings relative to the data on what's important within historic preservation districts as it compares to the city as a whole. So staff does recommend approval of the study and adoption as a policy document. And with that, we are happy to answer any questions.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for that excellent research and data and really helping us better articulate the incredible value of our historic communities, particularly in a time when we are celebrating Arizona Historic Preservation Conference Week. So thank you. Certainly an essential part of recognizing our path and building our future. I'll go ahead and see if we can get a motion, and then we do have 6 members of the public to address the council on this item. Councilwoman Pastor.
Thank you, Mayor. I motion to adopt the key findings of the Preservation's Phoenix style and recommend, as suggested by several members of the study's focus group, that staff return to the council with a proposal for preparation of a document that makes recommendations to the council to further support the city's preservation efforts.
Second.
Wonderful. We have a motion and a second, and we will now hear from members of the public who wish to address the council. We will begin with Dan Clockey, followed by Mark Rodriguez.
Mayor, can you hear me, Mayor?
Yes.
Great. Now can you hear me?
Still can hear you.
Okay, thank you. So thank you, Mayor and members of the council. This is Dan Clockey. I serve as the chair of the Historic Preservation Commission. Also in my private life, I've redeveloped multiple historic commercial buildings. So I've kind of have a good understanding of the nuts and bolts of these buildings and why they're important. First off, as Councilwoman Pastor already said, thank you for funding this study. I think it's really important to have this kind of information on record. I think a lot of it is counterintuitive for a lot of us Phoenicians that maybe think of new as being more valuable, when in fact this report shows that older buildings are actually producing probably more taxable revenues for the city of Phoenix, producing more affordable housing, are more sustainable, helpful for small businesses, and walkability and equity in general. So by nature, I'm a pragmatist, and sometimes historic preservationists aren't thought of that way, but that's sort of my bent. And I know that as a city, as we begin to look more and more at infill projects, we are going to run into situations where it seems like the only solution is preserve everything in place or bulldoze everything. And what this report indicates is that keeping some of these older buildings, in fact, a lot of these older buildings, is really important for all the things that have already been mentioned. But we need assistance from you all from a policy perspective and from a funding perspective to make these things happen. And I think first off, really from a policy perspective, the most important thing is that we as a city have development standards that aren't conducive to old buildings. We require lots and lots of parking, most of which isn't used for a good part of the time. We require very small amount of lot coverage for our projects, most of which is empty. So I think if we can get creative, we can use different development standards, especially when we're mixing old and new buildings together, because I think that's a lot of the solution. I would also say, and I'll wrap up real quick, that in order to make this happen, there are funding needs, ongoing funding needs to help reinvest in these neighborhoods and commercial districts. It will also help us prevent those inevitable loggerheads that we get to about knock down or preserve, because there are solutions in between that I think we can find. So thank you very much for this report, and I look forward to working with you in the future.
Thank you for your leadership on these issues. Mark Rodriguez is next, followed by Jim McPherson.
Hello, Mayor Kate Gallego, Mayor KG, and everybody at the PHXC City Council. How are you all doing today?
Great.
I'm doing well, Mayor Kate Gallego, and I know it's happy birthday to Laura Pastor and Ann O'Brien, because I want to say happy birthday to them. And also, Mayor KG, I hope you get your card, because I mail it to you at your office, and also I was always talking about the houses, that all that stuff where we live, we move and all that stuff. And my mom and I live on 19th Avenue in Southern and 35th Avenue in Southern and 19th Avenue Rozier and 7th Avenue and apartments and 51st Avenue, the baseline, and then now on 72nd Avenue and baseline now, because we live all the houses. My mom doesn't like any houses because she always gets complained and all that stuff. And also I want to shout out to Yasmin Asari, which I went to the Pride on the Block. Ann O'Brien, Laura Pastor, happy birthday to you too. Deborah Stark, Betty Wangado, Domo Arigato, Carlos Garcia, Jim Waring, Sal DeCiccio too. Not a fan of him, but it's all good. But I like talking to you, Mayor Kate Gallego, and I wish all of you guys could ask me questions and all that. I know you're kind of busy. I know you're saying what all the communities and all that stuff. And Mayor KG, I kind of like you, but I want to meet you and see you in person one of these days, if I get the chance to see you. But who never knows? It's because I like hanging around all of you guys. And also that I love all you guys talking about all that stuff. And Betty, I missed your event, but I want to go there next year if they do like walk-ups or drive-through on a Halloween, because that's all for me. It's morphin' time.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you for the card. Jim McPherson is followed by Brent Kleinman.
Jim, are you on the line?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Proceed.
I'm sorry, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Please proceed.
Oh, great. Thanks. I was having some trouble with my internet.
Jim, please proceed.
I have not heard Jim. Okay.
Hi, this is Jim McPherson. Am I on?
Now we can hear you. Thank you.
Okay, there we go. Hi, everyone. This is Jim McPherson. I'm Arizona Preservation Foundation Board President, a volunteer position representing state and historic preservation advocacy. And I first want to start off by saying, thank you, Mayor Gallego, for mentioning the conference that's happening this week in Tempe. We also host the Governor's Heritage Preservation Honor Awards, and Phoenix has won a number of awards over the past numerous years that we've been holding the event, and including a special one in 2006. The Honorable Ed Pastor, father of Councilwoman Laura Pastor, was honored to be there and present the Congressman with an award for all his long-standing initiatives and efforts on behalf of preservation. Regarding the plan before you today, preservationists have been thought of just as thinking about coming from the heart and from the gut. And I think what this plan does so well is also put in the head. So it's the combination of facts and figures and the social and economic and quality of life factors that make historic preservation so important to our communities. And Donovan and Michelle will be presenting at the conference, and so a much greater audience will be able to hear about it. The Preservation Foundation supports the study itself, the findings within the document, and we think it's a great next step for Phoenix. We have a lot of work to do, unfortunately, because I'm just across the street from a building, the old Quevedo Chevrolet dealership on Grand Avenue that had a fire this past weekend. We need more tools, resources to protect our historic resources. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. Brent will be followed by Ryan Boyd.
Good afternoon, Mayor and members of the council. This is Brent Kleinman. I am a resident of Encanto Palmcroft, and just excuse me, I'm kind of taken aback by this plan. I guess I'm not even sure to call it a plan. It seems to be a report on where we are up to today. But I would ask and be interested in what are the intentions of the city and what are the goals of the city going forward from this report, and how are we going to intertwine historic preservation between residential, commercial, to benefit all the parties of development and preservation groups. We obviously have a potential large item looming just west of Encanto Palmcroft with the state fairgrounds. No one's really certain where that is going and what is happening. And I feel that this report, while it's detailed and it's very interesting, really provides no stepping stone to move forward to take the next steps. And I know the Councilwoman Pastor mentioned in her motion that we provide that, but I think we need to be specific in what we're seeking and what we're looking for. And I'm somewhat surprised the City Council is discussing this and taking action on this at 2:30 today, when the Historic Preservation Commission is discussing this and possibly taking action on it 4:30 this afternoon. It seems, I guess I'm not sure where the rush is to do this and where we want to take the next steps with this, but I think those next steps have to be clarified as clearly and quickly as possible. Thank you all very much.
Thank you. Ryan will be next, followed by Andy.
Good afternoon, Mayor. Quick note here. Actually, I was hoping to speak on 1B, but the request to speak form only allows you to put numbers and not letters. But in support of this item, I'm very happy to echo all of Jim and Andy's comments, but would love to reserve my time for 1B, if possible.
Thank you. A good note. We will be back to you at 1B. Andy, I am guessing, does want to speak on historic neighborhoods.
Yes, thank you, Mayor and council members. My name is Andy Abkarian. I am here on behalf of Downtown Voices Coalition Historic Preservation and Neighborhood Subcommittee, a new one this year, to share our support for the Preservation Phoenix style report by place economics. We ask that the City Council dedicate resources to support any actions that can further the goals and the findings of the report. The DVC is really behind this because it supports the values and priorities of our guiding principles, especially to preserve historically eligible properties, sustainability, and connectivity. And I think what's important too to note is that it really demonstrates the need for us to issue a new bond, which would be the first one since 2006, and to fund grant programs and protect these resources because, as this report demonstrates, they're so beneficial to the local community and the city as a whole. But another thing that's real important that the report shows is that historic properties or older properties provide a real critical affordable housing. They continue to be highly sought after, even in the down markets, based on their proximity and walkability to all of our cultural assets and business and transit. The other thing is that the report shows is that the historic districts are home to multi-generational families, and they offer duplex and accessory dwelling units and other multifamily units, which increases their density. And although the plan doesn't touch on their character, preservation and historic conservation plans, it does mention that they are critical to our affordable housing needs. So as our housing and rents continue to rise, the historic districts can really play a key role in providing housing options to support density and neighborhood diversity. So lastly, and as importantly, we'd love to see a follow-up study and are so grateful to Michelle Dodds for her dedication and can't thank you, Mayor and Council, enough for your support for this consideration. So sorry to run over time.
Thank you for your comments. And maybe we should speak a moment to schedule, which it is not a coincidence that we are having this the same week as the Historic Preservation Conference. We wanted Donovan and his team to be able to share the results with the state conference, as I think they are very relevant. So maybe I'll just turn to Michelle for a moment on anything she might want to add.
Mayor, thank you, members of the City Council. We were just thrilled that we were to make all this happen in the same week. It was kind of challenging trying to schedule all these presentations, but we're here today, and we are here at the Council first to share with the Council first the report. Thank you.
Mayor, members of Council, if I can just add, it's a study that is assembling census data and other statistics into a report to document the importance of historic preservation. And the HP Commission has been briefed along the way and talked about, knowing that with the schedule of having Ms. Ripka fly in for this presentation and also to meet with them and the conference later this week, they understood that it was coming to council first and then to them later on this afternoon for them to vote on. But because there's no recommendations associated with it, which is typically where our hearing bodies, weigh in and provide, their expertise for the mayor and council to consider, in this case, it's not going to change the statistical data that's presented in the report. And so having it come to you guys first and be able to take action, and then the HP Commission, and then going on from there to make the presentation at the conference is completely fine. To get to Mr. Kleiman's comment about where we going with this study is just in and of itself a report that gathers that statistical data, puts it into a format that is digestible and that the public can use to understand the importance of historic preservation. If the council wants staff to go forward with additional recommendations and something more in the future, that would be a second phase study. That would be having public input and discussion as part of that. But first, we would come back and talk to the council about exact proposal, what that would entail, how much that would cost. All those items we would come back pursuant to the motion on the floor from Councilwoman Pastor.
Wonderful. And I would say to Andy, I agree it is time to do another bond, and our financial team is gathering the analysis ready, and I am hopeful maybe by 2023 we can move forward with that, but that certainly doesn't mean we don't look for other financial tools such as the HP allocation that was in this year's budget, which was the largest it has been in a while, but maybe we can keep looking in those areas. And perhaps we will also see great leadership from the state of Arizona as well. Additional comments from my colleagues?
Mayor.
Councilwoman Pastor.
I have one comment. Can we talk about the heritage commercial areas and what those findings were? Because it's great to hear that 20% of all jobs in the arts, entertainment, and recreation area in these heritage commercial areas. And so I don't know if we could talk about the importance of the heritage commercial areas.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Well, we were really struck, and again, that's why this core focus group was so important, because we didn't have the nuanced understanding of the neighborhood commercial districts, and so they were identified for us, and then based on those, we looked at that data. And the warehouse district, all 6 of these districts, they really are vibrant, energetic, and place. And there's a concept in economics called revealed preference. That is, I could ask you a question, do you like chocolate or vanilla better? And you'd make a choice. That's stated preference. But revealed preference is when we look to the marketplace and see how the marketplace acts as revealing their preference. Well, what you're seeing in that disproportionate share of the kind of creative class jobs that are in those 6 districts is the revealed preference of those workers reflected by where their employers choose to locate. They want to be in funky, cool places. And that's just what's emerging. There also, and again, I had to pick factoids, there's a higher concentration of minority-owned businesses, by the way, in those 6 districts than there are in the city as a whole. So they are districts that, for lots of reasons, proximity, character, affordability, a whole lot of reasons, they really do play a very important role, disproportionate to their geographical size in the city of Phoenix.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman. A good question. And when I talk to companies that pick our historic warehouses or some of our historic buildings in District 4, they say they came to our city because they wanted cool, unique buildings that have real history. They weren't just any company, and that not any space would be good enough. So certainly my experience is consistent with what the research revealed as well. Any additional council member comments? All right. Does anyone need Councilwoman Pastor to repeat her motion before we vote? Hearing none, roll call.
Ansari.
Yes.
DeCiccio. Guardado.
Yes.
O'Brien.
Yes.
Pastor.
Yes.
Stark.
Yes.
Waring.
No.
Garcia.
Yes.
Gallego. Yes. Passes 7-1.
Thank you to Place Economics, Michelle, Dodd, and Alan for your hard work on this item. It will be a resource for us for a long time to come, and we will continue to move forward on these related policy items. We continue our infill investment item with 1B, which is review of vacant storefronts and retail spaces. And as we transfer some of the presenters for this item, I want to thank the former members of the Workforce and Economic Development WED Subcommittee for being the catalyst for today's discussion regarding how to address vacant storefronts and retail spaces. Thank you to Councilwoman Stark for asking that this discussion continue with the entire council at today's policy committee. And with that, I will ask Ginger to introduce this important item.
Mayor Gallego and City Council, our second item on reinvestment and infill is an update on staff's review of vacant storefronts and retail spaces, which is a result of the work done by Planning and Development, Community and Economic Development, Neighborhood Services, and our third-party consultant. I have with me today, again, Alan Stevenson, our Planning and Development Director, Joshua Benerick, our Deputy Planning and Development Director, our consultant, Mo Glancy, with Glancy Consulting, and Christine Mackey, our Economic Development Director. And with that, I'll turn it over to Mr. Stevenson.
Thank you, Ms. Spencer. Mayor, members of council, as was discussed a few minutes ago, the WED subcommittee did direct staff to look at what kind of options we could bring forward to address the impacts that vacant storefront commercial spaces and underutilized commercial have in creating appearance of blight and a negative overall image within some parts of the city. And so as part of that, staff did some outreach with business and development communities to seek input on ideas. We'll talk a little about that, but I want to make it very clear up front that by no means is the outreach component done. All we are doing as part of this is talking to the folks who would make investment decisions into these retail spaces and redevelop them. The next phase of that would be talking to the larger community about impacts and concerns related to any of those proposals. But first, we need to understand from the folks who are doing it what they would want us to look at trying to help them with, so then we can have a broader discussion. And so that's where we are in this overall process. I do want to provide a little bit of background for the full council and those that may be watching. The City of Phoenix has 40.5 square foot per capita commercial space compared to the U.S. average of 28 square feet per capita. So what this really means is that we have too much retail, and there's not going to be enough retailers in some of that commercial space. No matter how much we want to try and revitalize it and what we do, it's not going to be retailer because there just aren't enough retailers around. By way of describing some of the zoning pattern that you see without getting too much into planning geek speak, the zoning that was established within Maricopa County in the 50s really established a 300-foot wide commercial swath along all of our major streets for retail zoning. That's why you look at older streets, 7th Street, 7th Avenue, Bell Road, you have this small commercial going all the way through, and it's because of that zoning pattern over time, along with then a later focus of shopping opportunities at major intersections that really creates this abundance of commercial square footage that just isn't supportable. As part of our community feedback, we've heard potential for affordable housing, looking at other mixed-use opportunities, other schools that could go into some of those areas where there's just too much retail overall and the uses need to transition to something else. To further kind of talk about the background, even pre-COVID, there was a significant change in the retail environment that we were all experiencing and seeing. We all know of irrelevant retailers and brands, Sears, Toys R Us, Babies R Us, all those stores that no longer have a physical presence anymore, and those leave empty spaces. Technology advances relative to people being able to order things much quicker and get them to them, and there's a comfort level in that has really changed consumer behavior that was in the process, pre-COVID, but still certainly was magnified that. The other changing retail environment item is really social media and the desire for retail spaces to be seen as that third space, that cool place to hang out when you're not at work or you're not at your home, and having context in which to do that is something that is all the retailers are having to address, and those that aren't able to address that aren't really going to be successful. And of course, I won't spend much time going to the effects of COVID-19. We've heard a lot about how that has impacted retailers and restaurants associated with those types of activities. So the overall process that the staff went through was first forming that internal city team. In addition to the three departments that Ms. Spencer mentioned, we also did talk with the fire department and the public works department. We did hire Mo Glancy as part of Glancy Consulting. Many of you may recall that Mo was the assistant director here within the department before he retired and has gone on to a consulting business around the state and the western U.S., and so we're happy to have him back to really do a deep dive in some of our process improvements as it relates to vacant storefront commercial for this item. The larger department-wide items will come back to the council in a few months here. In addition, we did a lot of property owner, business, and developer outreach. As I said, that's that first step to look at getting input from those folks who make those financial investment, those design, those construction decisions relative to projects to figure out what are things we can do to try and help. And then based upon council direction today, we'll obviously go have a lot more discussions with surrounding neighborhoods and other interested folks. So in terms of our outreach here, we did have 14 data gathering listening sessions. They were 31 different organizations, developers, and elected officials who participated in those. Some of those are still ongoing to continue to collect information and data about that as we move forward. One of the other things I want to highlight here as we talk about our storefront project here, and really what we're after is trying to get some council direction to create a vacant storefront program that would have elements of it within the Planning and Development Department, elements within Community Economic Development, as well as Neighborhood Services Department. And so overall, collectively, those efforts are ones that have their basis in a number of plans that have been adopted by the mayor and council, in recent years. We have our general plan, our Housing Phoenix plan that calls for, substantial number of new housing units to be put in place, our economic development strategic plan, as well as our recently adopted climate action plan. In terms of how we broke up the report here, we do have options for zoning and land use items that Mr. Bednarik is going to talk about, options for development process improvements that Mr. Glancy is going to talk about, and then options for market funding and other considerations that Ms. Mackey is going to talk about. And with that, I will turn it over to Mr. Bednarik, and then we'll be happy to answer questions at the end. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Alan. Mayor, members of the council, we heard a lot of great suggestions as part of our discussions about potential changes to the zoning ordinance that could help with vacant storefronts. We've organized those suggestions into 5 categories for options. As Alan hinted at earlier, they all require additional analysis and outreach, and ultimately, if moved forward with, all would require a text amendment to the zoning ordinance, which would proceed through our public hearing process. So our first option area is a potential expansion of permitted use list. All vacant storefronts exist on some type of commercial zoning, C1, C2, PSC. Each of those districts has a fairly robust set of permitted uses that allow for things like restaurants, retail, office, and multifamily. What we've heard is a suggestion to take a look at those permitted use lists and add new uses that aren't explicitly permitted today. Things like neighborhood fulfillment centers where residents could go pick up online shopping orders, data centers, microbreweries and distilleries, and artisan manufacturing. Option number 2 is parking relief options. And we heard a lot about this as part of our discussion. All of our commercial zoning districts have minimum amounts of parking that have to be provided on site per the specific use and then corresponding with the square footage. There are some reductions allowed in the zoning ordinance, but they're limited to specific areas like our infill development district. What we heard was a need to go and take a look at those standards, potentially program in some additional reductions or alternative ways to get some flexibility, and even look at installing additional staff in our Office of Customer Advocacy to help with finding alternative parking solutions. Our third option area is an expansion of multifamily residential development in our commercial districts. Now, all of our commercial zoning districts allow some type of multifamily development, but within parameters, limitations on dwelling unit density and building height, and they're all coupled with fairly large setbacks along perimeter property lines and public streets. What we heard is a need to take a look at those standards, maybe allow for some additional flexibility with respect to density and the requirements for those large setbacks, in the hopes that that might spur more mixed-use development on some of these commercial sites. Option area 4 came out of some discussion about the need to clarify landscaping standards for our adaptive reuse projects. All of our commercial zoning sites have requirements to install landscaping along the street, parking lot, and in some cases, perimeter property lines. Like parking requirements, there are some exceptions for those in certain parts of the city. What we heard is a need to go back and take a look at our requirements to make clear what those exceptions are, and then update our policies on making clear exactly how those would be administered. Last would be a review of our special permit and use permit applications. There are a variety of uses that can't be installed on a commercial property without going through additional public hearings. For example, massage therapy and self-storage require a special permit, which proceed through our rezoning process, and uses like tattoo parlors and outdoor dining require a use permit, which proceed through our zoning adjustment process. The suggestion is to take a look at those uses, assess whether or not those requirements still make sense, and maybe relax them in some cases to make them easier to install on commercial sites. Mayor, that concludes our options for zoning and land use. I'll hand it over to Mo Glancy to go through development process options.
Thank you, Josh, and good afternoon, Mayor and Council. As Alan mentioned, we also have a number of options related to the city's development process. These will require modifications to existing policies, staff training, and additional resources, depending upon the recommendation, but we think they will facilitate reuse of these vacant retail spaces. The Annual Facilities Program is a premium program that combines plan review and inspections for large existing industrial, manufacturing, and office buildings. We would expand it to include a shopping center program within AFP that would streamline the permitting and inspections process for tenant improvements and remodels in both existing shopping centers and even portions of existing shopping centers. The Office of Customer Advocacy helps our small businesses navigate our development process, and they also administer the city's adaptive reuse program. The Newton shown here is a great example of an adaptive reuse project. It was the former Beefeaters site, and it's now a really successful mixed-use retail and restaurant and office project. And the Office of Customer Advocacy was very instrumental in it. And we would propose expanding the OCA and the adaptive reuse program to include assistance with conversion of older centers or centers that are deemed no longer economically viable into smaller multifamily or other compatible uses. We would then create a retail reuse team of site and civil plan reviewers that would sort of assist the AFP and OCA efforts in getting the site and civil reviews done. And they would be the experts on the types of issues that these retail centers face when trying to redevelop. Adelante Healthcare here is another great example. It's a 40,000 square foot healthcare facility that went into the former Sports Authority at Metro Center. So it's another example of what you can do with some of these spaces. We would also propose developing a generic fact-finding process, because one of the barriers that we find for redeveloping this is just the unknown, that the owner doesn't know what's possible. And so we would be able to provide them with a basic list of possible uses in the site. We could give them data on their existing parking and infrastructure, and also let them know about any programs the city has to help them really target the right tenants and help guide them through the process prior to spending money on site plans or other pre-development costs. Another proposal would be to work with the Community and Economic Development Department to identify and outreach to a few shopping centers that are really ready for redevelopment. We could identify big picture issues and then also let them know of areas where the city may be able to provide assistance in encouraging private investment in their site. We would also provide some additional staff training, both on the development process to make sure that we are compliant with relevant case law for redevelopment and reuse projects, and also to ensure that they are fully, that they understand and are fluent in any of these new projects, processes, programs that we develop to help the retail reuse. We would streamline our appeals process to help ensure timely decisions for customers. And then we would also improve our information that's available for customers, for these developers, for the retail owners, to help them understand our process and what programs are available to them. Several of our stakeholders described the difficulty of providing on-site trash collection and fire lanes when converting smaller shopping centers to other uses because the space is so limited. So we would work with the public works and fire departments to evaluate policies and ordinances to see if there are any instances where we can add flexibility while still maintaining safety on these sites. And finally, we have a number of tenants in older buildings that have been there for years but don't have a certificate of occupancy. This could be because the building was built prior to annexation into the city. They could have been converted many years ago without a permit, or maybe they got a permit and never got inspections. We would refine our process to make it a little bit easier for these existing tenants to get C of Os in their existing suites. Those are our recommendations related to the development process. And with that, I'll turn the presentation over to Ms. Mackey.
Thank you, Mr. Glancy. Good afternoon, Mayor, members of the council. As we look at these older struggling centers, staff has identified options for council discussion in the creation of the framework of a vacant storefront program. So first, as you know, we keep a robust database of all the properties that are available here in the city of Phoenix, but they aren't as readily available to the public. One of our proposals would be we would work with private property owners and the council districts to identify those centers that are ready for redevelopment and post them on our website so the development community, a private property owner, or a business could easily peruse our website, see those available properties, and then link those to the potential processes that could be available for the benefit of their redevelopment. Next, council has been instrumental over the last number of years in utilizing the development agreement process to bring greenfield sites into development in creating public infrastructure and job training and other options that are available. We could look to use these same tools to help some of these older struggling centers in infill areas where we would do a process for public infrastructure relating to sharing of construction sales tax or infrastructure reimbursement. So using those same tools that we use to build these technology parks and business parks, helping those centers that are more closely aligned inside the community. One of the things we hear the most as we look at older center redevelopment is, as Mr. Glancy was saying, kind of that fear of the unknown. What is it that they're missing? And those are in demolition costs to bring the site back to a completely redevelopment opportunity. They face environmental issues or archaeological issues. We don't know what was there. So is there a potential for a creation of a program by which the city could participate in some of those environmental or archaeological fact-finding issues? Some of our developers, we look at the development agreement process, and that's where the development community or the business fronts the infrastructure costs, and they're reimbursed over a 10 or 25-year period of time. Some of our smaller developers don't have the luxury of being reimbursed over a period of time, but they do incredible community work and revitalize buildings and bring users back that the community is particularly interested in. So is there the potential to create a grant program within the city by which the smaller development community could tap into to put in some of the public infrastructure, whether it's trees, whether it's a water line or sidewalk or widening of our streets? And then looking at our capital improvement program, we have a robust program today, but are there areas of the city that, as I like to say, there's a there but for. So there but for economic development would happen. There but for revitalization would happen through private sector dollars. And being able to really layer over our capital improvement program, bringing water, streets, public works, parks, all of us in together into one smaller area to really elevate that area into revitalization and redevelopment, and then encourage private sector investment to follow through and follow behind it. As I always like to say, people like to shop and go where it's pretty, and this would help make some of our areas of the city more pretty. And then, of course, in our partnership with Neighborhood Services, with Spencer Self, looking at our neighborhood commercial rehabilitation programs that we have today, looking at some of the other cities across the country, how they use their community development block grant programs, how we could leverage those programs to bring additional revitalization in CDBG funds into our qualified census tract to help some of those businesses with revitalization of those individual centers. Mayor, members of the council, that is the end of the economic development portion, and I will turn it back over to Director Alan Stevenson.
Thank you, Chris, and members of the team. Mayor and Council, I want to also thank you all for the opportunity to address this important issue, as vacant commercial spaces tend to lead to poorly maintained shopping centers, which, due to their visibility along our arterial streets, tend to contribute to disproportionately to an overall negative image in a lot of cases. That also impacts people who live in their homes behind those neighborhoods and makes them question, why are they spending extra money and time to maintain their house when they don't live in an area as nice, that isn't as kept up, because the shopping centers are struggling to be able to maintain and do things they need to, because there just aren't enough retailers that are out there. So today we are not asking for any overall recommendations. We hope that some of the options that we have put forward spark some discussion with you all, and we know that you guys have a great amount of knowledge of what are the needs within your district, and so we welcome anything that we've missed or other items you wish us to explore as part of this. And then after today's discussion, we'll schedule some individual meetings with each of you to further that discussion and input, so that we can prioritize exactly how you would like us to proceed with this effort. And with that, we're happy to answer any questions.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. We have one member of the public to address the council, and then I will go to Councilwoman Stark. So we'll begin with Ryan Boyd.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. For the record, Ryan Boyd with the Urban Phoenix Project, in support generally of this item. And I do want to recommend that this is a great step forward for the city of Phoenix. And I just wanted to highlight that this is an important action for us to really discuss and get the ball going, because it kind of becomes a chicken and the egg solution, right? You need to have some level of direction from council to go out to make sure that all of the committee, that the staff is going in the right direction when it comes to having these community discussions. And then community discussions are necessary to make sure that any policy that comes out of it is correctly implemented. And I think that a lot of the things, especially I'm a nerd for planning and zoning, so I love a lot of the recommendations of areas we can look here, where there are areas where our planning and zoning code was built before really light rail was as successful as it is, as prominent as it is, and where the downtown was not as dense as it has become. And there are solutions now in those areas that are really inhibited in some cases, where there are requirements for massive amounts of parking and things like that, that we have to go out and help businesses get variances to operate because you don't need it when you have that many people living closer together and living in areas accessible to transit and walkable and bikeable streets. So I really wanted to promote that. I do have to say that it's something that I think the pro-development and pro-density kind of groups like myself do need to have these conversations often with the community, because I think the key here is there's a lot of confusion and a lot of mystery sometimes about what these solutions actually mean in practice. And I think that will be helped by having staff conduct meetings in the public and groups coming together and talking. Thank you again for your time, and I appreciate the direction of council looking into this kind of direction.
Thank you. Councilwoman Stark.
Thank you, Mayor. First and foremost, I want to say it's great to see Mo Glancy. And he was always a pleasure to work with, and he always has great ideas, so I'm glad he's helping us. I think these recommendations are great. I do think they need to be vetted a little bit more. I like the idea of exploring additional multifamily, but I know in some areas that may not be welcome. But I will tell you, I've actually had a neighborhood come to me and say, we'd rather have multifamily than the commercial we have now, because there's maybe 2 users in the center, and there's a lot of vandalism, there's a lot of littering, and so I think we can explore that. Their thoughts were, if there was multifamily, whether it was ownership multifamily or if it were rental, that there would be more eyes around the neighborhood, it'd be added protection. But I know that this would have to be vetted. So hopefully we could go through the villages and have them look at their particular parts of the city, and they may have some ideas and suggestions for that. I think we do need to review our special use permit process. Quite frankly, tattoos are pretty much the norm now, and a lot of these tattoo parlors actually look pretty darn good. So I'm really excited about exploring that as well. And I do think we need to expand the permitted use list. I mean, society changes and we have to look at ways that we can put uses in the right locations. I like all the development process ideas. I think this is just going to give more benefit and help to the development community. And last, the financial considerations. I'm very excited about looking at these, especially exploring the CIP infrastructure improvement program, trying to tie things together and we can build them in a more logical way. But I want to thank staff for all the work they've done on this. This is a huge undertaking, and I think this stats that you showed, Alan, that said we have an average of 40.5 square foot per capita compared to a national 28. We need to do something. I think we need to start addressing this vacant storefront. We see it all over the city, and I just don't think it's going to come back as commercial. So I'm very excited about taking this out to the public and having a good discussion. And it's not just the public, but the development community. We need to bring them along as well. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councilwoman Stark. Councilwoman Pastor.
Thank you. I wanted to thank staff, and I also wanted to thank Councilwoman Stark, who started this in the WED committee, and we were able to get it to policy. So, and staff has put a lot of effort into this. The areas that I have, I think we need to explore in many different ways, is in the zoning and land use to explore the additional multifamily. I think that needs to be a public process with neighborhoods. I also would like to see how in this process, if there are incentives built in, that there is workforce and affordability housing, if we are going to be providing incentives. The other piece and the incentives is really looking at distressed areas first, areas that really need some redevelopment to assist and help and get moving. I think there's and then define what is a distressed area, what calculates that. The parking relief, I know that there's people are asking for parking relief, but I also know that when you're hitting neighborhoods that have a shopping center and more activities going, and it all depends. I think there's just needs to be that vetted a little bit more, maybe a use permit, and there's a public hearing on it. I don't know, but those are just some of my thoughts. And let's see. I think we have some great examples that you showed. Uptown Shopping Plaza that's on Central and Camelback. That could have been a big area. It was distressed. It was operating, but it is now a vibrant space, and somebody went in and saw the historic piece of it, restored it, and then also made it very modern. And so I think we do have examples within the city of what we can do. It's just, it's a matter of how we do it. And let's see. One of the things that I heard in the development process recommendation that gave me a little angst, I guess, was evaluate policy and ordinances regarding on-site trash and recycling pickup and fire lane requirements. The fire lane requirements for me is important because a fire truck needs to be able to get in and out quickly. And the reason I have some experience with this in some of the developments in District 4, so I'm not really sure what staff is thinking on flexibility, but I think we need to, or at least understand and see what fire is going to say. I think that all those pieces are great. Let's see. What I would like to do also is, because I know I was part of this conversation, I had asked that we build a lot of plans and vote on a lot of plans, and you did a great job on layering on how the plans all come together. But in each one of those plans, we have designated dollars, and I want to see how much has been designated in each area. I'll give you an example. Clarify landscape requirements for reuse and asking for a shaded area. Well, we have provided in many different departments dollars for trees. So I don't know if we then put it in one department where there's a tree account and everybody can use it, or how much have we put into that area? And so I want to see what resources are already operating, or where we have those resources. So then we can see, okay, we need to place more money here, or we need to shift this over here. I think we need a bigger landscape of where all those dollars are and going in order for this to happen. So I just want to know eventually how much this whole plan will cost, because it's asking for a lot of dollars. So I would like, and I would like a total cost and how much staff. That's it. Thank you. Thank you. You guys did a great job.
Thank you, Councilwoman Pastor. Other council member comments?
Mayor?
Councilwoman O'Brien.
Thank you. I just would like to echo the sentiments of Councilwoman Stark and Pastor about ensuring that we get neighborhood involvement, as well as our village planning committees as we go through this. I am very thankful for staff for doing this and coming up with some options to explore so that we can help our neighborhoods and our communities and our business owners to improve in some areas. And as far as the additional multifamily, especially concerning the fact that we have a housing shortage, I just want to make sure that we're also entertaining the notion of for sale, not just for rent in that respect in the housing area. But I do look forward to working with staff and community as these get further developed. Thank you so much for the time, Mayor.
Thank you, and we'll go back to Councilwoman Pastor.
I would like to see how we could add in the heritage commercial piece into this plan, if possible. So, Alan, would that be possible?
Mayor, Councilwoman Pastor, I think as part of exploring some of the financial options, we could look at the possibility under the CIP, layering, if those are areas that would be appropriate to have some future city investment on infrastructure items that are lacking in that area, to ensure that we provide the best opportunity for those heritage commercial areas and the buildings that are there to stay in place and be reused and not further deteriorate because there's a really expensive water line that would have to come from a long ways away to continue to redevelop the area or something, for example. So we can certainly look at that as we evaluate these and bring it back to council for further direction.
Okay, that would be great. And then I have one more question. When all this, I just want to make sure that there's equity across the board. And what I mean by that is that small developers have the same opportunity as big developers in this whole process. Smaller developers don't necessarily always have the capacity that big developers are able to do. So I don't know how we look at it, but to look at it in an equity lens. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman Pastor. And to build on your comment about heritage districts, I think we could charge or ask Chris Mackey as she goes out and markets properties to particularly make sure our cool, unique properties get a chance to be in front of people. So that might also help support. Because when people get a chance to see some of these cool properties, they often fall in love. I want to really emphasize the great comments about the Office of Customer Advocacy. When I talk with projects that have used it, they have found it to be a valuable tool, and so would love to see us expand and really appreciated that idea. Also like the idea of a retail reuse team, and I'd welcome if other departments such as CED could be part of that, or maybe we even invite Maricopa County to collaborate with us, because I believe they do share some of those same goals. And I've heard from small businesses in particular, the more closely we work with the county, that makes it easier. Although we may know which permits come from the county and which come from the city, not everyone does. And the more that they can be partners with us if they are interested, that would be great. To the extent we use financial tools, I am still hopeful if they are for employment, that we focus on high quality jobs as a top priority, and particularly if we are abating costs, that they be related to city infrastructure as a top priority, as opposed to things such as archaeology. And I would include trees as part of city infrastructure when I think about what falls in that bucket. And I will join Councilwoman Stark in saying I'm excited to have Mo Glancy back and really appreciate his ideas about how we can make our processes more modern and make more sense. So thank you. And then I agree with Councilwoman O'Brien, housing affordability is a huge issue in our city. It's something that pretty much every time I'm out in the community comes up, and I agree with her both for rent and for sale products. We need all of the above in our community. So I hope that we'll continue this conversation. I would love to see if we can build on some of our recent successes where we've redeveloped commercial property and it has included housing, cool restaurants, and retail all together. We could end up being a national model with some of our successes in commercial redevelopment. And so this is exciting for me, and would like to continue that conversation about how we might incorporate residential in these commercial properties, and also really take a look at parking requirements, even if we begin with a pilot, to see how that would work. One of our neighboring cities is doing some innovative things on the parking side as well, and they have expressed willingness to share with us what they learn. Any additional council member comments? All right, well, that includes both portions of item 1. We will move to item 2 in a moment, which is focused on the Community Assistance Program expansion, the CAP program expansion, and an overview of that. And appreciate everyone who has been working on that particular program, mostly new people to the table. Our city manager, Jeff Barton, has been very involved, and Ginger Spencer, our deputy city manager, very busy woman today. So she has been very involved, an exciting program that got strong support in our last budget in the $15 million, and our largest investment of this type in mental health. So thank you to all the stakeholders who've gotten us so far, and now we're talking about the next steps. Jeff and Ginger, I will turn it to you.
Thank you, Mayor. Mayor Gallego and members of the City Council, as you know, the number of people suffering from mental and behavioral health issues often have a difficult time receiving the help and the resources that they need to navigate their daily lives. Across the country and here in Phoenix, the COVID-19 pandemic has exacerbated these conditions like never before. In an effort to appropriately align the city's emergency response for those suffering with these conditions and experiencing a mental health emergency, you took a bold and unprecedented action to allocate $15 million in the 2021 general fund budget process to expand the city's long-standing and highly recognized Community Assistance Program, or CAP, making it not only one of the city's largest general fund investments in recent years, but also making it one of the only programs of its type funded with a dedicated general fund resource across the country. With that, I'll turn it over to Ginger Spencer, who will introduce the team and those that will be working daily on this program.
Thank you, City Manager Barton. Mayor and Council, thank you for your leadership and investment in the Community Assistance Program and mental health services for Phoenix residents. And I want to thank you for the opportunity to provide an update on the CAP program expansion. With me today are Dolores D.C. Ernst, our CAP program administrator from the fire department. I also have Detective Sabrina Taylor, who is our crisis intervention team, known as CIT, training coordinator with the police department. Amber Williamson, our budget and research director, and Marshall Franklin, our human services director. Today, we're going to provide a brief history on the long-standing civilian-only CAP program. We're going to look at calls for service that 911 receives and how those calls are dispatched. We're going to give an overview of the original study that was done by Budget and Research and the recommendations that led to the program expansion. And we also want to acknowledge the continued investments by Mayor and City Council in mental health services that complement the CAP program. And lastly, we'll talk about our expansion plan, efforts to date, and our timeline moving forward. And with that, I'll turn it over to Ms. Ernst.
Thank you, Deputy City Manager Spencer. Mayor and council members, the Community Assistance Program was implemented in 1995 with one crisis response unit staffed with unarmed civilian volunteers and interns. The crisis response units continue to be staffed utilizing two civilian responders. For the past 15 years, CAP has relied on the Victims of Crime Act grant and general funds to support paid responder positions, including supervisory level positions. To date, CAP continues to need volunteers for 40 to 50% of staffing. This slide represents the diversity of the traumatic incidents to which our crisis teams respond and future behavioral health units may respond. Calls for service include death-related incidents, child abuse, domestic violence, sexual assault, and follow-ups. In the future, behavioral health units will be conducting follow-ups with the individuals they come in contact during their crisis situation. The Community Assistance Program is working towards better data management. Currently, we are unable to provide data on how many behavioral health calls for service we respond to each year. A crisis team typically learns while on scene that a customer has a mental health diagnosis or a substance use disorder, which may impact their ability to process or recover from an incident. Our teams engage customers in identifying supportive systems they have in place, such as case managers, family, friends, primary care physicians, or support groups, as well as identifying community resources to provide additional supportive services. A later slide will show examples of the community agencies we frequently work with. This slide provides an overview of the number of calls, customers served, and unmet needs per year. In 2017, CAP had 3 crisis response units in service. The Community Assistance Program staffing model consists of 8-hour or 12-hour shifts, and it takes approximately 22 positions to staff one crisis unit 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. The blue column represents total number of dispatches. The orange column represents the number of customers served, and the number of customers served, as you can see, is larger than the number of dispatches because often we have more than one customer on an incident. The gray represents unmet requests for crisis response units. Unmet responses are due to teams working another incident or to a unit not being staffed. In 2017, as you can see, there were over 1,600 requests for service that went unmet. In 2018, again, the numbers reflect having 3 crisis units in service, being dispatched to over 3,400 calls, assisting over 6,300 individuals, with over 860 requests for service being unmet. In late 2019, we added our 4th crisis unit, which resulted in an increase in dispatches and customers served. We had 855 requests for service that were unmet. In late 2020, we added our 5th crisis unit. While the number of dispatches increased by just over 250 calls, the number of customers served in 2020 decreased from 2019. We attribute the decrease to COVID restrictions influencing the number of individuals on a call. There were 1,027 calls or requests for service that went unmet. A contributing factor to the increase in unmet services was the program's struggles to maintain staffing during the pandemic. From January 1st to September 30th of this year, crisis teams have been dispatched to over 3,000 times, assisted over 4,000 customers, and there have been just under 800 requests for service that have been unmet. This slide shows some of those community partners and city departments we collaborate with. The time our teams spend supporting residents can range from minutes to hours. We work closely with our community and city partners to ensure residents have access to additional supportive services following the traumatic incident or behavioral health crisis. As the program expands, we will continue to develop these relationships and look for opportunities to create new connections with agencies within the community and the city. This map represents the areas where the crisis teams were dispatched in 2020, with the red and orange areas indicating a higher volume of calls than the yellow and the green areas. The blue boxes show where the current 5 crisis response teams are within the city. As you may see, there are only 4 boxes, and that's because 2 units share a location in Maryvale. The purple boxes illustrate the areas of town we anticipate placing new crisis and behavioral health units. As you can see, there are 6 areas in Phoenix identified with purple boxes. We anticipate placing more than 1 unit in a location. The new locations are influenced by data from police and fire regarding mental health calls for assistance. In addition, the placement of these teams will allow us to respond to residents in crisis in a timely manner. Now I'd like to introduce Detective Sabrina Taylor.
Thank you, Ms. Ernst. Mayor and council members, when one of our residents experiences a behavioral health crisis for the first time, they may not know who to call for help, and frequently in these cases, people reach out to 911 for assistance. When they dial, the call is answered by a communications operator within our police dispatch center. The operator asks the caller the 10 key questions you can see here on the screen to try to identify the nature of their emergency. Through this questioning process, the operator is able to triage the call and determine if the caller needs a police response, a fire EMS response, a mental health response, or some combination of these 3. On the screen here, you can see several examples of the types of calls that come into 911. Based on the information that the operator receives from the caller, they code these calls based on the primary nature of the problem. In our current system, there's no mechanism for coding any underlying issues such as mental health, substance use, or homelessness. For next steps, we know that behavioral health issues may be a secondary or tertiary factor to be addressed in some of these calls, and we're taking steps to help us better identify and document when this might be the case. We're partnering with ASU to examine when there are underlying behavioral health issues within these calls. We're also in the process of upgrading our software to a system that will allow for documentation of secondary issues that could be present on the calls. And we hope that these steps will assist us in determining which calls would be appropriate for the new CAP units and how they should be dispatched. And now I'd like to turn it over to Director Williamson.
Thank you, Detective Taylor. Mayor, members of the council, Budget and Research was requested to do a survey of other cities that have implemented alternative response models for responding to calls for service relating to mental and behavioral health. My staff contacted 10 cities in the western United States. We received responses back from 8 of those cities, including the well-known Cahoots program out of Eugene, Oregon. What we found from the cities we surveyed is they have either civilian or hybrid models. The hybrid model includes a co-response with public safety. 3 cities have a civilian model, including Eugene, Oregon, Albuquerque, New Mexico, and Austin, Texas. And 5 cities have a hybrid model: Denver, Colorado, Redmond, Washington, Salt Lake City, Utah, San Antonio, Texas, and San Diego, California. What we found from these cities and their programs, They do collaborate with the behavioral health community in service delivery. This is so that they can provide both on-scene response as well as get individuals connected to longer-term care. Most cities surveyed utilize mental health specialists, licensed clinicians, and social workers in service delivery. The goals of these programs that we surveyed primarily include improving outcomes for residents who are experiencing mental and behavioral health challenges and returning public safety personnel to the field to respond to true public safety-related calls for service. Also, another goal of these programs was to reduce response times and meet demand. What we found is a lot of programs are heavily reliant on grants or volunteers, nonprofit organizations for their service delivery. We didn't find another city that has a large general fund commitment to provide for the program, much like the City Council just did with their bold investment, as Jeff had indicated in the beginning of this presentation, $15 million in the current 21-22 budget. They also utilize third-party providers to either provide medical and or behavioral health services. And another primary goal is to prevent criminalizing individuals experiencing mental and behavioral health challenges. A lot of times individuals will contact 911 for help because they have no other means to get connected to services. This can sometimes result in arrest, incarceration, and prohibiting the individuals from getting the help that they need to improve their outcomes. So included in the current budget, as I indicated, the $15 million already approved by Mayor and Council to implement recommendations that were included in the BNR study. This will provide the resources to increase the number of crisis response units from the current 5 to 10 units. These units will provide on-scene crisis response services. And then also to add 9 new behavioral health units. These units will be staffed with a combination of city staff and also a third-party provider. Recommendations in our study also included to develop a stakeholder group. This is intended to be a collaborative and inclusive approach so that we can get feedback from not only the mental and behavioral health community, from for-profit and non-profit entities, but as well as Phoenix residents who have experienced these types of challenges, as well as we want to consider individuals who have experienced homelessness. We want to make sure that the program is designed to meet the needs of all. Also, to develop and update policies and procedures, particularly as it pertains to triaging calls that come into 911 dispatch. We want to make sure that there's members of the CAP team there so they can identify calls that can be sent directly to the CAP program or sometimes calls that might require a co-response from public safety. We also want to properly train our city personnel. This includes staff from police and fire as well as the CAP team members. We want to make sure they have the resources and skills so when they arrive on scene and they interface with these individuals, that they can provide appropriate and compassionate care. And then also collaborate with other city departments to coordinate services. The concept is to provide a comprehensive suite of services which will require the CAP to work closely with departments such as Human Services, Neighborhood Services, and the Housing Department. Also to work with our Finance Department to conduct a request for proposal to identify that third-party public-private partnership with the behavioral health provider. They will help to staff those 9 new behavioral health units. Utilize a telehealth platform. On some of these calls, individuals may be experiencing a comorbidity. That includes not only do they have a mental or behavioral health challenge, but they also might have a medical condition that's gone untreated. And then, as already mentioned by DC, to strategically place these units using data and heat maps from the police and fire departments to ensure that they're placed in the highest concentration of call areas to ensure for the fastest response time. And then develop key performance measures and reporting so that staff can bring back to council updates routinely, not only on the progress of the CAP expansion, but also on the program's effectiveness. Now I'm going to hand it over to Human Services Director Marshall Franklin, who's going to talk more about city investment in mental health.
Thank you, Director Williamson. Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. Under your continued leadership, the city continues to invest in mental health supports for our residents with our fire, police, and human services departments working very closely together on implementation. As a reminder, your continued investments include adding 10 positions for fire, emergency medical dispatch services to ensure emergency calls continue to be dispatched in a timely fashion, which also includes dispatching the Enhanced Community Assistance Program teams where appropriate, as mentioned by Ms. Ernst and Detective Taylor earlier in the presentation. Your investments also include reallocating 5 civilian positions that have been vacant for a long period of time from the Police Department to the Human Services Department to form what is called the Family Advocacy Team. This team was created as a result of community feedback and is responsible for providing comprehensive, trauma-informed care and referral for families, witnesses, and other persons directly impacted by police department-related traumatic incidents. This team currently works very closely with the Community Action Program team to ensure a seamless transition to long-term support for those individuals and families, and will continue to do so going forward with the enhanced CAP program. And in September of this year, you allocated $9 million in American Rescue Plan Act funds to support non-crisis mental health services for our community. An RFP will be issued later this year to select a third-party behavioral health provider that will include community-based outreach teams to deliver this program. I will now turn the presentation back to Deputy City Manager Spencer.
Thank you, Director Franklin, for speaking to the additional resources approved by City Council that complement the CAP program expansion and provide additional mental and behavioral health resources for residents in our community. Mayor and Council, we thank you again and we recognize your bold investment of $15 million to expand the Community Assistance Program. And to date, since July 1st, we have done the following. We hired our CAP administrator, Ms. D.C. Ernst, who you heard from earlier. We worked with the Human Resources Department to conduct recruitments to start filling the 130.9 FTE positions that have been approved for the program, including caseworker service coordinators, caseworker 2s, and caseworker 3s. We work with the Public Works Department to procure the 23 vehicles for the new fleet that is needed for the expanded program. We've worked with the Finance Procurement Division and the Fire Department to issue a telehealth request for information, which will allow us to do video conferencing with residents and medical staff. And from that RFI, we received 10 responses that will help us develop our telehealth request for proposals, our RFP. We identified a third-party vendor through an existing city contract to conduct public engagement and community outreach. We also work with our peer cities throughout the nation with the help of Harvard Kennedy School to do research on scopes of work to help us expedite our request for proposal processes. And we began research on new locations with the Public Works Department, the Finance Real Estate Division, and community-based organizations to identify future homes for our new units based on the heat maps that Ms. Ernst referenced earlier. Moving forward, so the original study that was done by Budget and Research actually identified an 18 to 24-month implementation. I want you to know that we are working on an accelerated implementation, and we are looking to get the program up and running within 1 year. So in November, we're going to post the RFPs, the request for proposals for both the telehealth services RFP and the behavioral health units RFP. Also in November, we are going to conduct public engagement and community outreach. And that will be done actually during the months of November and December. Also, in January, we plan to bring forward the Rfp Contract Awards. Basically, these will be the recommended proposals from both the telehealth and the behavioral health units RFPs to Public Safety Subcommittee in January, and then to full City Council in February, and with full implementation of both the telehealth and behavioral health units, our BHUs, in March of next year. Over the years, the Community Assistance Program, our crisis intervention teams, and the individual staff, many who you've heard from today, have received both local and national attention for their exemplary work. Most recently, the city was selected as one of 13 cities to participate in the Bloomberg Philanthropies What Works City Sprint over an 8-week period looking at alternative responses throughout the U.S. In August, Phoenix was the host city for the 2021 Crisis Intervention Team CIT International Conference, which Detective Taylor is the co-chair of that group. And then in September, the city was selected as one of 5 jurisdictions nationwide to participate in Harvard Kennedy School's Government Performance Lab, which will help us with our 1-year technical assistance grant to assist us with our program implementation over the next year. As we reimagine and re-envision the CAP program, we've learned that CAP is a popular acronym. As you can see on the screen, there are many programs that actually use the acronym CAP. So, like many of our peer cities, we are looking to rebrand the program. For example, there's the Cahoots program, which is out of Eugene, Oregon, and that's known as the Crisis Assistance Helping Out on the Streets program. There's the STAR program in Denver, which stands for Support Team Assisted Response. And there's also the HART program in Houston, which stands for Houston Action Research Team. That's actually in Houston County area. So as we look to rebrand our program, we thought it was important to keep Phoenix in our name. And so the new proposed name that we've come up with is the Phoenix Traumatic Response Program, PTR. Mayor and Council, that concludes our presentation, and we'd be happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ginger, for the and team for all the hard work to get us here today. We do have members of the public to address the council on this item, so we'll go again and begin with public comment. We'll begin with Jasmine White, support, followed by Wendy Philpott. Jasmine, the floor is yours.
Oh, can you hear me?
We can.
Okay, awesome. Good afternoon, Mayor Gallego, Vice Mayor Garcia, City Council members, and staff. My name is Jasmine Nicole White, and I live in District 4. I've come here to talk to you in support of expanding a community assistance program. And what I saw on the slides was a great first step in the right direction. But let's really remember why we are even having this conversation. And we are having this conversation because humans, members of our communities, do not feel supported or cared for in their time of need by the current system in place. So last year, 11% or 66,545 of the calls made to 911 were for nonviolent crimes such as welfare checks and mental health issues. These are all calls that could be directed to our community assistant programs. This is why I support the need to expand a community assistant program, which must be independent from current first responders. Let me repeat that, a program independent from current first responders, which means this program will not report to the police, ICE, or any third-party vendors that leads to incarceration. Think of all the people outside of that 11% who have not called our first responders because of fear, brutality, or incarceration. So this is why a community assistance program is the path we must take if we want to rebuild trust, hope, and faith in our communities, especially for minority communities. As Albert Einstein said, we cannot solve our problems with the same thinking we use to create them. It's time we think in new ways, and supporting organizations like Neighborhood Organized Crisis Assistant Program allows us to approach nonviolent crimes in a much more qualified, collaborative, compassionate, trusting, and loving way. Now, I don't know about all of y'all, but that is the legacy I wish to leave, and I'm only 25 years old. So I hope to see that in my lifetime, and I hope that you all take what I said and support the expansion of the Community Assistant Program. Thank you, Mayor, Vice Mayor, Council members for listening to me.
Thank you. Wendy will be next, followed by Jacob Rayford.
Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. First, I start off by saying I was excited to hear that you're changing the name from CAP, because yes, there is a lot of things that go by CAP, so this will help a ton. My name is Wendy Philpott, and I work at La Frontera Impact Suicide Prevention Center as the Director of Crisis and Trauma Healing Services. And that title says a lot about what we do at our agency and the goal of our services. As one of the 2 county crisis mobile team providers, our individuals, our clinicians, they encounter individuals on one of the roughest days they've ever had. There's often first responders on scene, and we all have the same goal. We want to change the outcome for this community member for the better. With over 4 million people in Maricopa County and a total of approximately 34 mobile crisis teams operating on a rotating schedule 24/7, 365, it's often difficult for one first responder entity or one crisis system to provide the massive demand. With a collaboration and streamlined behavioral health crisis support with the Phoenix Fire Department, we will better be able to expand our resources with a therapeutic focus for a significantly larger amount of the community. I am in support of this proposed system change to help save lives for those that are suicidal and or mentally ill. I'm happy to know that someone is focusing on this need. The different systems of care don't need to be separate. Everyone's focus should be on mental health, at least in some capacity. It could mean the difference between an increase in support and safety or a decrease in support and safety for our community. So I look forward to the implementation of this project, and I'm excited for the focus and help that can be out there for our community.
Thank you. Jacob will be next, followed by Cynthia Garcia.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Jacob Rayford here, Be Rising No Cap Coalition. Firstly, if we could not refer to citizens experiencing intimate human trauma as customers, that would be great. Humanitarianism is not a business. Again, it's imperative that we create a crisis assistance program independent from current first responders, one that is accessible via 911, one that's legitimately recognized as comparable to fire, EMT, etc. Now, we understand CAP, no CAP, PTR may temporarily reside under fire, but it's absolutely imperative that it evolve into an independent service of its own during its development. A department, a program that does not work or report to police, ICE, third-party vendors that lead to incarceration, people experiencing intimate personal traumas will be hesitant to seek assistance if the stresses of potential police intervention is a possibility in an already precarious scenario, right? Trust and empathy are important. And this city has an opportunity to start with a clean slate regarding the rapport of a first responder department and the general public. And I understand that there's council members who may lean towards police culture advocacy, but this is a matter of practicality rather than politics. So police officers, fire, are not fundamentally equipped to deal with the nuances of behavioral sciences. Now, as a city that prides itself off of wanting to mirror its program after Eugene, Oregon's Cahoots program, it's important to note that Cahoots supports the ideals No Cap upholds and has gone on record as such. So it can go without saying that the directions of No Cap is truly beneficial to the community as a whole. Adopting our fundamentals and overhauling the current CAP program or PTR is the most effective way to address and even help prevent human crises. The ongoing development requires the guidance of a publicly ran steering committee for development comprised of stakeholder groups, impacted family members, right? This committee will also vet all third-party vendors. Local issues shouldn't be addressed by resources that reside outside of our region. Again, it's important that representatives not carry weapons or less than lethal weapons, as those are still trauma-inducing. And there's plenty of other things that we would like to discuss as No Cap Coalition with the general public and how this ongoing program could be beneficial to our community. Thank you.
Cynthia will be next, followed by Lynette Pompa.
Can you hear me?
We can.
Hi, Cynthia Garcia with We Rising and the No Cap Coalition as well. I'm also an advocate for adults with developmental disabilities. I'm here today in support of a crisis program. We do believe in uplifting voices of all community members, those who are going through hard times, through crises. We do want a crisis program that's independent from first responders, not one that's going to report to police or work with police or work with ICE or lead to incarceration. That doesn't really help anyone, landing them in jail. It doesn't help the situation. It actually makes it worse. We also want a committee that's public ran for development, and we want this committee to be vetted, to vet all the third-party vendors. As you heard earlier, No Caps has the support from Cahoots. This is a great model, and I hope you guys basically take our ordinance and implement it here. That's all.
Our final speaker will be Lynette.
Hi. Thank you, Mayor and members of council. Again, my name is Lynette Pompa. I'm the Glendale Fire Department Human Services Administrator for the Glendale Fire Department. I've been with the fire department for 20 years. I'd like to stress my support for the Fire Community Assistance Program expansion. It's critically important to have the behavioral mental health services within the 911 system. This system and the responses have had to evolve due to the community needs. It's no longer just fire, it's EMS, hazmat, technical rescue, prevention, crisis intervention, and now behavioral and mental health services. Many times behavioral or mental health calls do not show up as the primary call for service. For example, someone might call 911 for an assault. When the fire and police arrive, there could be weapons. Someone might need medical attention, perhaps both, or maybe neither. We won't know until public safety arrives. When the primary call type, in this instance an assault, is diffused, many times the underlying issue is a behavioral or mental health concern. Our first responders on scene can take care of safety and medical needs, but there might not be a need to arrest or transport a patient. Having immediate, professional, qualified behavioral health personnel dispatched by the mutual aid system is critically important to streamline the continuum of care. Mayor, Council, please continue to support the CAP program. Invest in improving the mental health and behavioral response in your city. Support the individuals that are experiencing these difficulties immediately, not waiting for a third-party response. Improve the mental and behavioral health call for service by creating an effective, multidiscipline approach, having police, fire, human services, neighborhood services, housing, and community-based organizations will ensure accountability, responsibility, and transparency. Thank you.
Thank you all. That concludes public comment. We'll go to the Vice Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Ginger, and all the staff for presenting to us. I think like the folks that called in, a lot of folks in our community are encouraged by this conversation and the investment we've decided to make as a city, but there's still some caution out there. And I think that caution is welcome to make sure that we have the best program possible. I think we need to have a space where community can continue to have dialogue on best practices and how to make this project move forward. I want to recommend that the city manager create a task force of experts to move this forward, including behavioral health professionals and those with lived experience. And I want to mark that, those that have lived experience and have needed those services so that they can help guide us as we expand this program. I think the name, I think it makes sense. I think there's an after-school program that also has the name that wasn't mentioned. I'm encouraged by it. I don't know if I like the traumatic word in there. I think that's something that we can continue to look at. I think the word safety, alternatives, I think we could think through what something else could be there that really identifies the intention behind this program. But I like that we're shifting it and trying to kind of give it a new beginning. As an office, we hope that this program will produce different results than the current systems. We already know, and some folks mentioned that our police department cannot be the catch-all for all the issues, especially all societal issues in the city. Our residents do deserve a more expansive resource network to get to the heart of their needs, instead of continuing to be funneled through the criminal justice system that we've seen is not always equipped to support the community. With that, I have a couple of questions. A couple of folks mentioned ICE or police, and I wanted to ask a question. I don't know if it's to Ginger or somebody else. What is the current communication, or better yet, confidentiality, or ways in which folks are protected that are seeking mental health or other sort of supports to ensure that folks aren't unnecessarily criminalized or just criminalized to begin with, especially moving forward. If you don't feel it's needed now, moving forward, because this group is going to be sometimes making first contact, what are some of the assurance or confidentiality or ways in which we can make sure that this program doesn't lead to criminalization or sending people over to immigration or other law enforcement?
Mayor and Vice Mayor Garcia, thank you for those comments and for the questions in regards to ICE or police. Basically, we want to make sure that we are doing our part to make sure that individuals that we are working with who are experiencing mental health crisis, that we don't further traumatize those individuals. And as you heard Director Williamson mention, that was part of the goal of doing the CAP program expansion by having those behavioral health units respond. I would also like to ask Detective Taylor as well to talk about ICE or police.
Vice Mayor Garcia, thank you for the question, Mayor and Council. Currently, we are attempting to drive our contacts to the behavioral health system as soon as possible and then remove police, as our last caller mentioned. We have worked with an organization known as PRA to map our justice system and identify intercept points where we can divert callers back to the mental health system. Currently, we do have a clinician from Solari in with our dispatch 20 hours a week, and our dispatchers are diverting approximately 500 calls a month directly to the crisis line and diverting our entire city system. So individuals who identify as a mental health crisis that need no other city resources are immediately being transferred back into the crisis system. And we are training our police and our officers as soon as they recognize that there's no need for their presence, they can divert people over to the current county crisis system and to our current CAP teams. Thank you.
Thank you. And the last question is, and I know there's a couple of studies happening, but one of the concerns or one of the conversations we've had is having this new service. Obviously, the CAP program or whatever the new name is going to be, this program is not going to continue a continuum of care with folks. And so I'm wondering from what we know so far or the current partners of CAP, is there a thought that sufficient resources are out there for us to be able to hand folks out and make sure that they're taken care of after our initial contact or our referrals?
Mayor, Vice Mayor Garcia, and council members. So another great question. With the CAP program and the CAP program expansion, to your point, there are a lot of different providers out there in the community right now. And so what we are looking to do is to connect individuals to the continuum of care. So we are looking to complement the services that are currently out there and not to supplant them. Also, the monies that the $15 million that was provided for the CAP expansion, part of that is for us to do third-party behavioral health units. So that's another opportunity for us to work with community and for the organizations that are currently doing the work to partner with the city to provide that service. And with the those units, the behavioral health units, so there'll be one city staffer as well as the an individual from the community-based organization, the CBO. And for those individuals, we are looking for individuals who actually have lived experience. And what we're calling those positions are peer support specialists. So again, what we want to do is make sure that we have follow-up with individuals that we come in contact with, but that most importantly, that we are linking them to the continuum of care. And so I believe the monies that have been provided by City Council that have been approved will not only allow us to expand our program, but also allow us to get some of those monies out to the community as well.
And two short comments about that. I really hope, and I think you are, and I trust that you all, that we make sure that we're working with a diverse group of folks and make sure that cultural competency is present with any of our partners. And the last thing I say, I think as we, all embark in this new program, I think it would serve us well, one, to obviously the suggestion I made earlier to have a task force that supports us through it, but also create a network as the growth is going to be needed and as we start providing this different service or start engaging in a different way, then we make sure that we all grow together. So if there's grant support, whether in partnership or whatever we can do to support some of the folks that we're going to need to follow that continuum, that we can make sure to be there for them. So thank you all so much for answering the questions.
Councilwoman Pastor, did you?
Yes, I had some questions. In looking at these providers, what I would like to really see and understand is that I would like to see quality providers. I just don't want to have providers because they're providers. I want quality in the sense of really providing the services that that individual needs. So I don't know how we vet that or how we write that, but that's one of my concerns. The second item is I do not like the name. And maybe we go back out and we do with the community to create a name. I do not like the term traumatic in the name. Some people may feel like I'm having a traumatic or describe a situation that I'm in traumatic, but in my mind and my brain, that's not what's happening to me. So I think we need to go back to that piece in that sense and really look at it. Maybe we can create it in a way where it's an uplifting term or name, but we all know what it means in the sense of the meaning of what it is. Thirdly, I support the group or Vice Mayor Garcia on bringing a task force together to create or to really have these deep discussions and people, and I support the community who's requesting it to have this dialogue and really create an awesome program. We're using cities and several cities that have built great examples, great models that also had the community support. So that's all. Thank you for doing this.
Mayor
Thank you,
Gallego?
Councilwoman Pastor. I'm sorry, who was that?
Mayor Gallego, this was Ginger. I was just going to acknowledge the comments from Councilwoman Pastor, but thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Ginger. Additional council member comments.
Mayor.
Did someone else wish to make Councilwoman O'Brien?
Councilwoman O'Brien, thank you so much. Thanks, Al. I do want to say thank you for working hard to get this implemented at a sooner date. It is wonderful to hear that we'll have more resources in a year instead of 18 months to 2 years potentially. So thank you for all of your hard work, and I just look forward to when we're able to offer these additional resources to our community members. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Certainly agree with you, Councilwoman O'Brien. We are a quickly growing city and our call volume is also growing very quickly. The sooner we can have more of these life-saving resources out in our community, the better. I think we've heard from the community, the sooner the better. That said, we want to continue to have a dialogue. The amount of people who called into our council meetings as we were talking about the budget and this item in particular was probably as broad as any item we have ever had. We had people who were directly impacted. We had people from the clergy community, the hospital community, the behavioral health community. We had neighborhood leaders, data experts. I mean, it really was incredibly broad. The School of Social Work folks called in. And so we want to continue to have everyone welcome to participate in this discussion and not say certain people are in or out. If small businesses have ideas, we welcome them. As we do the RFP for both this and the $9 million in federal dollars we have allocated towards mental health, I would also be open to awarding to more than one applicant, especially if that would make it possible to start serving more people sooner. One of the things we did hear over and over again was that there is a need for professionals in this area. And so if there are more than one nonprofit or Mercy Care can take part of it and others can do suicide prevention, I would welcome a multiple nonprofit partners to be involved and really help us have as many areas of expertise as possible and deploy as quickly. Ginger alluded to this, but I was excited when this council approved some of our workforce dollars going towards peer support credentials so that people who know how to successfully navigate can be part of our team. And I think that is one of the more innovative things that we are doing with this program that I am personally very excited about. So if you didn't, for people who are watching this item but didn't watch a previous discussion of workforce, we are really trying to think about making sure we have the opportunities for people to work in this areas that we need. Any additional comments? Thank you to Ginger and your team for your hard work on this item. We will continue conversations with our entire community. We are adjourned.
Is for us to look at the other individual as a whole, not as us putting a bow on it or trying to fancy up the relationship, to try to make it seem something that it's not, to pay attention to those red flags. And it's never too late to get out, no matter how much it hurts, how much fear is behind it. It's the best decision that I made in my experience was to get out of that situation. But I had to look at it for what it was, not for who I wanted him to be, but for who he